Hello, class. Welcome to another pre-recorded lecture. I'm glad that you have joined the recording today. Today, we'll be talking about suicide. We'll be talking about suicide today. And as chaplains, as we support patients, family members, and team members, it's very important that we have basic knowledge about suicide. And today, we'll be starting out with some definition of terms, and as it relates to suicide. So the first definition that we'll start out with is suicide. Suicide is defined as death caused by self-directed injurious behavior with intent to die as a result of the behavior. Another definition is that suicide is when people harm themselves with the goal of ending their life and they die as a result. And so again, suicide is when people harm themselves with the goal of ending their life and they die as a result. So suicide is self-harm that has resulted in death. Next one is suicide attempt. A suicide attempt is a non-fatal, self-directed, potentially injurious behavior with intent to die as a result of the behavior. A suicide attempt might not result in injury. So again, the suicide attempt is where the intent did not end in death. And you also, again, the person might not, the attempt might not have resulted in injury. As we talk about suicide attempt, also we should avoid using these terms, or terms such as committing suicide, successful suicide, or failed suicide when referring to suicide and suicide attempts, as these terms often carry negative meanings. So again, we're going to avoid terms such as committing suicide, successful suicide, and failed suicide. And so, suicide is where the person as the self-directed injury or behavior has resulted in the person's death. And so there's no need for, say, committing suicide or successful suicide, because suicide, again, is where the self-directed behavior resulted in that person's death. And then, we don't need to say failed suicide. When we say suicide attempt, is that we're saying that self-directed behavior has not resulted in the person's death. And the reason why we avoid these terms, again, is because they have negative connotations or negative meanings. So let's talk about suicidal ideation. We hear a lot about that over and over again. Suicidal ideation refers to thinking about, considering, or planning suicide. So let me say it again. Suicide ideation refers to thinking about, considering, or planning suicide. And so as we talk about suicide, it's very important for us to underscore the prevalence of suicide, the prevalence of suicide. Suicide is a major public health concern. Again, notice that it's a major public health concern, because the reason why it's a public health concern is that suicide does not only affect the person that takes his or her life, it affects family members, it affects communities such as church community or the neighborhood, and it has lasting consequences and public health resources as well. So suicide is a major public health concern. Suicide is among the leading causes of death in the United States, and that's a cause for concern. So suicide also impacts co-workers as well, and friends. So let's get some numbers. In 2020, suicide was the 12th leading cause of death for all ages in the United States. So notice it was the 12th leading cause of death in 2020, changing from the 10th leading cause of death in 2019 during the emergence due to the emergence of the COVID-19 deaths and increases in deaths from chronic liver disease and cirrhosis. And so again, just underscore that in 2019, it was a 10th leading cause of death. But in 2020, because of COVID deaths and also increase in chronic liver disease and cirrhosis, we see that suicide has been bumped up to 12 as the second leading cause of death in people age 10 through 34. So again, notice that is second leading cause of death for those who are 10 through 34, and the fifth leading cause of death in people age 35 through 54. Suicide is a major contributor to premature mortality. So those who die prematurely, suicide is one of those major causes. After increasing from 2000 through 2018, we're talking about the rate of suicide. The age-adjusted suicide rate declined from 2019, which was 14.2 per 100,000 to 13.5 in 2020. So there was a decline, even though it had a steady increase from 2000 through 2018. There was a decline in 2018 and 2019. As we can see up there on the chart. Let's get that chart there. Age-adjusted suicide rate in the United States. So we can see from 1991, we can see that the total rate, and when we're talking about total rate, you can see that is the middle one. We can see it was 10.5 per 100,000. Then in 2019, again, it was 13.9 per 100,000. And we can see in females, we can see that it was 4.099 per 100,000. And then in 2018, it was 6.2 per 100,000. For males, it was 17.8 per 100,000, and then in 2019 it was 22.4 per 100,000. And so I don't know if you see that males are over 3 times likely to die, by suicide than females, because they're, females in 2018, 6.2 per 100,000, and males 22.4 per 100,000. Suicide rate by age group. And so we can see that by age group, let's look at the female side, the light blue right there. We can see that the 45 to 64 are more likely to die by suicide than any other age group. But that age group has the highest prevalence of suicide rate. And also 25 through 44, we can see that it's 7.4 per 100,000. For males, we can see again the 75 plus age group, 39.9 per 100,000, followed by the 45 to 64, which is 29 per 100,000. So let's look at suicide rate by race. Suicide rate by race. Let's look over on the female side. We can see again that American Indian, they are more likely to die by suicide than any other race, because they are 11.1 per 100,000. And for the males, we can see that American Indian again is 33.4 per 100,000 likely to die by suicide than any other race. Then we see that is followed by whites, which is 29.8 per 100,000 deaths by suicide. And we can see what it looks like as it relates to the spread of suicide across the United States. We can see that the dark blue as the highest rate of suicide. We can see that most of the highest rates are more towards the west, Midwest, West Coast, they're about. So again, we can see that the West dominating in suicide rate. So let's talk about suicide by method. So the method that people use as it relates to suicide. And so we can see here on this graph, suicide by method. This was a 2019 data set. And we can see that firearm is the most likely method that is used by suicide, 23,941, followed by suffocation, 13,563, and then poisoning and other. And let's look at as it relates to gender. And so again, presence of suicide deaths by method in the United States. And for firearm, that's the highest for both females and males as it relates to methods. So for females is 31.4. But look at how high it is for males, which is 55.6. So right here, we see that males are more likely to use more lethal method than females. And also we see that suffocation is the second method for males, which is 28.4 per 100,000, and are 28.4 percent. And as we can see also for females, we can see that there's almost a tie between suffocation and poisoning with 20.9% and 30%. Let's talk about suicide thoughts and behaviors. So when we're talking about what's the prevalence of suicide thoughts and behaviors, so we can see that 4.5% of the population, adult population in the US had suicidal thoughts in 2020. And what's this data, we just need to be a little cautious with it because of the pandemic and how it was collected, because they had collection strategy was changed. There were pockets where no data was collected. And we can see that females have a higher prevalence of suicide thoughts than males, 5.2 relative to 4.5. And we see that the 18 to 25 age group has the highest prevalence of suicide thoughts, which is 11.3. And then we can see 2 or more races, 11.0, highest prevalence of suicide thoughts. Let's talk about past prevalence of suicide attempts among US adults, 2020 data. And we see that 0.5% of the population attempted suicide suicide attempts or attempted suicide in 2020. Also 0.6% females and 0.4% males. And say again, females are more likely to attempt suicide than males, but males are more likely to be successful than females because they use methods that are more lethal. And then we see again that the 18 to 25 age group, the prevalence is 1.2% of that age group. And then we see 2 or more race, 1.9% rather. Then we see 2 or more races, 1.2% of that population. Also, we see that in 2020, in 2020, 12.2 million adults had serious thoughts of suicide. 12.2 million adults had serious thoughts of suicide. 3.2 million adults made suicide plans. 1.2 million adults attempted suicide in the US. 920,000 adults made plans and attempted suicide. And then 283,000 adults made no plans and attempted suicide. So again, we can see that suicide attempts were 1.2 million, but we can see that there were others who made plans and attempted, but also we see that there are individuals who did not make a plan, but they attempted suicide. In 2020, as was reported, and this is in the adult population again, 12.2 million adults had serious thoughts of suicide in 2020. Let's talk about warning signs of suicide. Warning signs of suicide. These are some of the signs that will tell you that somebody is thinking or someone is planning suicide. Talking about wanting to die or wanting to kill themselves. So when you hear somebody talking about wanting to die or wanting to kill him or herself, then that is a warning sign. Talking about feeling empty or hopeless or having no reason to live. Again, hopelessness is one of those precursors to suicide. So talking about feeling empty or hopeless, that's a warning sign. So talking about feeling trapped or feeling that there are no solutions, so this is where the person is very pessimistic. And so again, because they can't see any solutions. So that's a warning sign. Feeling unbearable emotional or physical pain. And so those individuals who feel unbearable emotional pain, and sometimes this can be a cancer patient or other patients. And so unbearable pain, emotionally or physical. Talking about being a burden to others. So when you hear somebody talking about being a burden to others, where the person feels like he or she is burdening, probably the caregivers are burdening from members or other important individuals in their lives, that this might be a warning sign that a person might be contemplating suicide. Withdrawal from family and friends. So the person is isolated. And so this also is another warning sign. Giving away important possessions, giving away important possessions. So this is where probably the person is giving away clothes, giving away shoes, giving away furniture, and the person probably is not moving. This might be a warning sign. Important possessions, giving away car, or those kind of things. So this will cue us as it relates to the fact that this person might be at risk. Saying goodbye to friends and family. So when somebody is saying goodbye to friends and family, and this can be done in many ways, it could be through a letter, it could be through music, it could be even social media as well. So saying goodbye to family and friends, that can be a sign that the person is contemplating suicide. Putting affairs in order, such as making a will. This can also be a sign that the person is contemplating suicide. So this is where the person is putting his or her house in order, putting his or her estate in order. And people can do this, and it doesn't have to be, but especially when this is followed by some of the other signs, then you can have a good guess that this person is at great risk for suicide. Talking or taking great risk that could lead to death, such as driving extremely fast. So this person is taking great risks or practicing risky behaviors, then this could be also an indication that the person is at risk for suicide. Talking or thinking about death often. So the person talks about death very often, and the person is thinking about death often. This is also a sign that the person is at risk. Making a plan or looking for ways to kill themselves. So this is where the person is making a plan or looking for ways, and this could be where somebody might be searching online for different ways. So making a plan or looking for ways to kill themselves, such as searching for lethal methods online, stockpiling pills, or buying a gun. You want to pay attention to these details. It's important to note that suicide is not a normal response to stress. It is important to note that suicide is not a normal response to stress. Again, those are not normal responses. Normal responses are fight, flight, or freeze. And suicide is not one of those normal responses. And so again, suicide thoughts or actions are a sign of extreme distress and should not be ignored. So let me say that again. Suicide thoughts or actions are a sign of extreme distress and should not be ignored. And in these cases, we can walk and journey along, but also we can make referrals to mental health, professionals to be able to provide support to these patients or get a mental health consult. So let's talk about strategies for helping suicidal individuals. Suicidal individuals. The first that we want to do is ask, are you thinking about killing yourself? Ask the question, are you thinking about killing yourself? It's not an easy question, but studies show that acting at risk individuals, if they are suicidal, does not increase suicides or suicidal thoughts. So asking this question again will not increase the person's risk of suicide or suicidal thoughts or ideation. Keep the individual safe. Keep the individual safe. This is super, super important. So reducing a suicidal person's access to high lethal items or places is an important part of suicide prevention. So this is where you reduce that person's access to a firearm or other lethal, methods. Also, while this is not always easy, asking if the at-risk person has a plan and remove or disable the lethal means can make a difference. So asking the question, do you have a plan? What is the means you're going to use, and being able to disable that means is very important to keeping the person safe. Next one, be there for the person. Be there for the person. It could be that you could stay there until help comes. Listen carefully and learn what the individual is thinking and feeling. So this is a time to be there for the person, and being there, listening, communicates that you are there for the person, that you're there to journey with the individual. Research suggests acknowledging and talking about suicide may reduce rather than increase suicidal thoughts. So again, acknowledging and talking, journeying, asking, curious questions or being curious about what's going on with the person can be really, really helpful to the person, and, communicate to the person that, someone cares and that that person is not alone. Next one, help the individual to connect to source of help. So for example, you can, give the person the National Suicide Prevention Lifelines number, which is 1-800-273-8255, and the crisis text lines number, which is 741-741. And you can store these numbers in your phone so that it can be easy to access, if you ever need them, or you can, Google them as well. You can ask, you can also help make a connection with a trusted individual, like a family member, a friend, a spiritual advisor, or mental health professional. So help the individual to connect to these sources of help. As chaplains, we often do that, to connect with sources of help. It could be a family member, it could be the person's pastor, or that person's minister of religion. Also, we can also make a mental health referral or referral to a mental health provider, or we can go, for example, online and find mental health providers in our local area. And another a good place to do that is to go to Psychology Today, and we can find mental health providers based on zip code. Next one is stay connected. Know that you have connected the person with sources of help. It's important that you stay connected, and it could be that you connect with the person with sources of help in the hospital. You can stay connected to the person, make sure you follow up. Staying in touch after a crisis or after being discharged from care can make a difference. It could be in some cases just a follow-up call to just check, but make sure that you get the okay from the person to be able to follow up. Studies have shown the number of suicide deaths goes down when someone follows up with the at-risk person. So again, studies have shown that when a person who has been suicidal gets a call, a follow-up call, it shows that has a negative impact on suicidal ideation or suicidal plan, because the suicidal rate goes down. And so again, as chaplains, these are some of the things that we can do, to walk with the individuals, keep them safe, disable the lethal source, connect them to sources of help them stay connected with these individuals. And so I hope that this pre-record lecture will be helpful in helping you to develop your professional practice as you provide support and as you provide care to those who are in your care, patients and family members and even team members. Because again, suicide is a public health risk, because the suicide not just only affects the person that carried it out, but also impacts that person's family, friends. It could be co-workers, it could be the person's neighborhood, it could also be that person's faith community as well. And so thank you for joining the pre-recorded lecture today. And I hope that this will be very helpful in your practice as a chaplain.